All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the AAAS and to Mahmoud for the opportunity to share some thoughts and reflections with you all today. I'm going to spend my 10 minutes talking about some opinions that I have about getting academia with a specific focus on environmental scientists out of their traditional modes and mindsets. And I'm going to share some steps that we have taken at the University of Minnesota to advance those goals. It probably doesn't need to be said here, but frankly, I think we can. It's not possible to say it too much. And that is that society desperately needs science. And that's because we are experiencing, among other things, and today I'll emphasize, profound environmental change. And we need science both to understand those changes, but we also need science to help us understand what we can do about it. I also think that academic scientists have an obligation and a duty to serve the common good, and that means helping people survive and maybe even find ways of thriving in the face of those profound environmental changes, like these people experiencing the extreme monsoon in 2017. But our language about environmental change speaks volumes about how we see, as scientists, our role in society. We claim that science delivers facts. It does. CO2 is a greenhouse gas. That's a fact, for example. But a lot of what the world needs from science is more than simple facts. We also focus on describing impacts. These are the bad things that are going to happen when the environment changes. Our journals are also full of assessing vulnerability. This is a measure of risks to come. And we tend to prioritize conservation, which is keeping things as they were. These kinds of words tend to emphasize impact, and they do have some reverence for the past. But consider these words instead. These words embrace the common good. These are the things that voters, policymakers, and our students want. And we need science to get these things as well. When scientists work toward these ideas, we will share core values, or we do share core values with the public, and we are helping to create a positive future. Here's an example. Scientists, myself included, can measure the risks of climate change to biodiversity. Recent estimates, for example, suggest that 900,000 species could face extinction worldwide within this century because of climate change. But the same methods that we would use to estimate risk, we also can use to make recommendations about climate change adaptations, smart adaptations, such as creating landscapes that promote species migration, or creating urban environments that are climate resilient and friendly to biodiversity. In fact, there's really nothing in principle holding us back or preventing academic environmental scientists from engaging in the kind of normative and forward-looking ways that I proposed in an earlier slide. Some fields, engineering, agronomy, are already doing that and have done so for a very long time. But many fields still are focused more on environmental assessment than they are on environmental solutions. So I'd like to share with you several things that I think are needed to build an academia that more completely fulfills its duty to the common good, with specific reference to the environment, but I think this extends to many other social needs and social ills. And I will share, as an example, to stimulate your thinking, some steps that we are taking at the University of Minnesota within the Institute on the Environment. And the Institute on the Environment, we call it I-on-E, is a system-wide university asset. It's focused on interdisciplinarity and engaged scholarship. and we work on driving innovation in how we do research and the development of leadership within the Academy. So here are 6 points. Lest you think about falling asleep, you'll be able to see how far we're going along these 6 points. First, we need to build academics that take responsibility for solutions, not just diagnosing problems and offering tangible strategies. At the Institute on the Environment, we do this by making sure that we fund research that actually articulates in its method and in its strategies and its plans how it will result and include solutions from the very beginning of the planning process for research and the construction of research teams. Second, we need to put people in the center of research about the environment. We might think as environmental scientists that we are primarily studying biophysical processes, but it is people and the values of people that make decisions about the environment. At the Institute on the Environment, we embraced this by actually changing our mission. Our current mission, our purpose, is to lead the way toward a future in which people and planet prosper together. Third, we embrace and not fear public scrutiny. At our institute, we are working to pull public engagement earlier into the research process, and we also are incentivizing co-creation of research over the idea of public communication and outreach. Fourth, we must move faster. I hear this all the time from our external stakeholders, people who are looking to the universities for creative ideas. All of our stakeholders and constituencies want us to be responsive. At our institute, at the Institute on the Environment, we've created a new platform that allows us to quickly assemble teams of researchers that can work with external stakeholders to produce results within 9 to 12 months. Fifth, we all know we need to provide training, and I'm grateful to see those data that training actually make a difference in the enthusiasm of individuals to actually engage in science communication. I hadn't seen those particular data before. But in fact, some of the folks that need the most training there's not actually a lot of training available for them. And that includes some of our most senior colleagues, our most entrenched academics, our most esteemed and established researchers. There tends not to be a lot of training directed to them. In our institute, we spend time in workshops and in engagement training and peer mentoring with all levels of faculty, including very senior faculty. We also recognize that incentives are important in encouraging science engagement by researchers and faculty, and that comes, an important incentive is the satisfaction of being engaged in a societal problem and being able to see tangible solutions. But we also can do our part to recognize their work. So we have a competitive fellows program for junior faculty where we provide training and we build community. Importantly, we also pair those young faculty, early career faculty, with a senior scholar who has a proven engagement track record, and those senior scholars provide our mentors that help guide junior faculty through the tenure process. Oftentimes it's about making your case effectively in the tenure process that is critical for engaged in interdisciplinary scholarship. And sixth, we need boundary organizations to exist within the academy. We need them, of course, outside of universities as well, but it takes time and talent in order to work with people outside of the university, and we must make it easier for our best and brightest researchers to get outside of the university. The Institute on the Environment is a boundary organization, and we host dozens of events each year with the sole purpose of getting external stakeholders and our best and brightest researchers in the same room for repeated interaction. And we actively facilitate connection between researchers and external partners to lower that barrier. So I'll end by saying, I actually think it's very helpful, or can be very helpful, for us to be frank with the public and with ourselves about the needs and challenges that we face in higher education, in particular in the environmental sciences. Because I think that frankness is necessary to help us build a more positive working relationship with other institutions in society and with the American public. One that's based more on this critique and self-assessment and honesty and building trust, and one that is less built on rhetoric. As recipients of public funds, or as for those of us who are part of public universities, it is our duty to make sure that scientists and scientific institutions are helping society build the future that we all want. Thank you.
Thank you. So we turn to questions from the audience. There's a microphone, and they have to come right there. Okay. While we are getting people lined up, I'll go to Twitter and take one of the questions from there. So Teddy is asking, how do we make changes for alt careers at the federal level? Make funding more alt career friendly. So, you talked about alternative careers and so forth. So how do we do that at the federal level?
I want to make sure I heard you right. How do we make alternative careers more valued at the federal level?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, but if somebody wants to chime in, I'm not.
Let's not call them alternative careers. Let's start with that.
So one of the things that happens in my office is I tend to find people who are graduate students who are finishing their PhDs in science and who decide they want to get a career in outreach and engagement. And they usually end up coming and working for me, and then they go off and have awesome and amazing careers, not because of me, but because of their inherent interest. And I think part of that is making it count at the academic level. I mean, we heard Patty talking about that. We train people in a certain way to go on and be academics. We don't necessarily train them or value training in public engagement. I don't know how many of you have classes in public engagement for your graduate students, but we have them on our campus, and usually the enrollment is low, not because the interest is low, but because they can't get their faculty to agree to let them do that. Or they do it on the sly and they don't tell them, right? So I feel like there needs to be a change, not just at the federal level, but at the institutional level, to value how we're training our graduate students to be engaged in research and engagement.
Is it possible I can elaborate a little bit more?
Yes.
I'm more thinking about in terms of
Turn your microphone on.
how we fund the process. So we have NSF, we have NIH. How we fund it. So, for instance, our PI gets a bunch of money for NSF, NIH, and the idea is that we need to do the research to get the results for that. And while Broader Impacts has made advances in terms of we should go out there and do outreach to the community, there is still this pressure as a grad student to do the research, get it done, and how can funding help support us going out and doing other things than sitting at our bench?
So I don't have a magic answer for that, but I'll tell you what we do on our campus. One of the things that we do when faculty write in graduate students into their NSF grants, you're required, if you have a postdoc, to have a postdoc mentoring plan. We encourage them to also do a graduate student mentoring plan. It's not required, but to get people thinking about what will your graduate student get from working with you that they wouldn't get anywhere else. And we also encourage them to include transferable skills, mentoring, outreach and engagement, grant writing, things that generally graduate students don't always have a chance to actually study or learn when they're on their way. And I think that's something that's important, and I remind our faculty that that counts as a broader impact. One of the things that we talk about in our trainings is that there's this thing we call Wheel of Fortune BI. Now this shows how old I am, but if you remember Wheel of Fortune before they gave you those 5 letters and the vowel, they started giving people R, S, T, L, and N, and E because everybody picked that. And what we call Wheel of Fortune BI is I'm going to have a graduate student, I might work with an undergraduate, I'm going to go and present at a conference, I'm going to publish a paper, and everything I learn in my research I'm going to put into my classroom. Well, everyone is doing that, and federal agencies see that as your job, not as something that's actually a broader impact. So what we do is we say, if you're going to give your graduate students these extra skills, then that actually is a broader impact, and you can count that towards your proposal, and that seems to go over very well.
And just to add on that one, there was a study that showed, it came out this year, their job search success was correlated with support from your advisor. And I remember one of my advisors really wanting to help me, but really not having the exposure to the kinds of things that I was interested in doing. So there's paths also to help advisors have more connection to the things that they can direct their students to.
I'll just add that we should never use the phrase alternative careers, ever, right? Yes. For so many reasons, including the fact that we want scientists in the broader workforce. The fact that we perpetuate the idea that scientists lives within the ivory tower or within research and the enterprise at the federal government or whatnot, that is a societal shortcoming that we must overcome. I also like to talk to graduate students, and if you are a graduate student, it's too late for this piece of advice, but when you're thinking about graduate school, you should look at the graduates of the people who come from that lab, and where are they? And choose a mentor carefully. One thing we encourage students to say, a simple thing is, there are a variety of trainings on campus. Just ask your prospective mentor what she or he thinks about you spending time in those trainings. That will tell you volumes right there. So that's not a direct answer to your question.
Great. Hi, I'm David Berube. I'm a professor at NC State. I'm lucky enough to have been doing this for about 30 years. I'm on the FDA's Risk Communication Advisory Committee, and I'm also on the Research Triangle Nanotechnology Network with too many labs and too much assessment going on. But we need to do it. I think the first thing I wanted to say is, in response to the question we just heard, is the people who review these grants know when the broader impact is fake. We know it. I review crap loads, and I'm using that word, of grants, lots of them, right? And when we get to the broader impacts, if there's no method, if there's no assessment built into it, it's just a joke, it's just hyperbole, right? And tell that to the PIs, because they're not gonna get funded, it's just not gonna happen. My request is this, because I've been waiting for this for a while. We need to have data on how successful outreach is, but we need to have longitudinal data. Because the immediate response we get from our government overseers is that worked well there, but, oh, it worked in that instance, but how long will it lag? Will it stay in the community? And this is something for the AAAS to do, because longitudinal research has to have 2 points. Right? It has to have the initial research that's being done, and followed by research sometime in the future. And as an organization, I think this is something that we should push forward. And if no one else wants to do it, we should chat, and maybe we'll get on a grant together, because a good longitudinal study on outreach will be worth every penny that's invested in it.
Can I talk about that just for a second? So that is one of the reasons behind building our binders platform, is that just like broader impacts can go away at the end of a grant, a lot of time the evaluation goes away at the end of the grant. I can speak from my own personal experience. My daughter wanted to build a robot that would clean her room. I love that, right? I'm all for that. So she went to Lego Robotics Camp in our College of Engineering, and they run wonderful programs for kids. The problem is, no one has followed up with her at any time to see if she's taking more science courses because she did that. I guarantee no one is going to talk to me in 6 years when she goes to college to see if she's taking a degree in engineering because of that. And that's not really anybody's fault, other than there's lack of money and there's lack of resources for faculty to do that. So how do we, at some larger, either institutional level or national level, figure out how we do this longitudinal tracking to see if we're actually having the impact that we're supposed to be having?
Hi, I'm coming at my question from an outsider perspective. I'm not in academia. I run a nonprofit that I created that exists to do public engagement of science. So my question is, how do I, as an outsider, assist with these efforts? If I am talking to either a faculty, a department chair, a dean, or a VP of research, saying, I do the engagement, we get it, your faculty is supposed to do this stuff through your NABI grants, and I do it. They don't know how to do outreach, that's what I do. I produce very creative outreach programs, but I need your scientists. It is very, very difficult to infiltrate universities. They're huge, siloed institutions, and there's not like one number I get to call and say, please inform all your researchers that I exist, and I can make their NABI outreach really easy. So what can I say, what can I do about my research, my efforts, that would make it appealing to a researcher, a department chair, a dean, or a VP of research, so that they will engage and they will support this, and I can make it easier for them?
This is a bit of a crass response, and I'm not a vice president for research, but here's what I think a vice president for research might want to hear. How will the engagement work that you do and the work that you do with the people at my university be publicized or visible or affect the reputation of my institution among my stakeholders? So how does that information get out into the world that pays dividends for what people think about us? Right now, the university administration, at least in public institutions, is really very, very worried and concerned about public perceptions of academia, one. And two, where can you help me get money?
Okay, I get the money thing, and I can get you money because if you partner with me, the first and only one I've done so far of NABI grant came by a fluke. Faculty member wanted support for something, and I said, well, what about that idea we talked about? And it was the first simple idea off my head, and he said when we wrote it into the grant, it got rave reviews in his broader impacts. So I can't bring you money directly, but I can help with those if I can get in there. But my question is, so you're saying, I can do the PR, I can tell you how much media outreach I will do with my program, but that's talking to the VP of research. You had said earlier that different people at different levels, if it's not a PR play, other people care about other things. Are there different messages I have to do at different levels?
I think it would pay off to do a little bit of work that seems like it's not directly getting you something tomorrow, but finding some champions, maybe building a network on campus across a couple departments that gives people a chance to share lessons learned, and so you're going to create some more champions. And then I've always had success with sort of high customer service, meaning the more that you can get the scientists to really work on science and just show up, the more they're going to say to their friends, hey, that really was great for me, I got a lot out of it, and it didn't slow me down. So you're not looking for the altruistic ones. You're really, so it's a two-ended. One, really getting the scientists to find it not a burden, and two, working on the university to get it expected and have regular partnerships. So maybe you can start with a partnership in just one department, but then try to create a network that expands it across a couple departments. And then universities are very competitive. So if you could maybe get some stories from Susan and say, look what they're doing over there, and look how much money it brought in them. And you have some good data on that. I think that could go a long way. The VPRs and the chancellors, they want data of what is this going to bring me. And so if you can sort of make the case of, I think you can get millions of more dollars if we have this a little more systematized.
Actually, I'll take a question from Twitter, and then this goes to Susan. The question is from Amanda. Do any of your initiatives help these Missouri universities to partner with local business or industry entities?
Yes. Yes, that's all we've been talking about this entire week, is talking about how do we partner with industry, right? One of the things that we know is that federal funding is shrinking. It's getting smaller and smaller, and it's harder to get money. Business and industry can be a potentially great partner for funding broader impacts work. So yesterday morning I had the phenomenal pleasure of meeting Dr. Mae Jemison, the first black woman in space. unbelievable. And it was a partnership between the First Lady of the state of Missouri and Bayer, who has a program called Making Science Make Sense. And Mae Jemison is one of their brand ambassadors. Phenomenal program. They are looking to impact over 1 million students with science over the next 5 years. I said, I want to help you. You can help me help you to do that. So absolutely, we are working very closely with our faculty in terms of workforce development. If many of you have been paying attention to legislation, 8 years ago, the Broader Impacts legislation had improving STEM education and diversity and well-being of Americans as the first few listed. If you look at the legislation from last year, that's flipped now. Workforce development, national security, and economic competitiveness are now listed first in our legislation. That is not an accident. Those are the things that we're being asked to do every day with our faculty, is show the value of that. So we're working very closely with industry to do that.
Hi, Ren. My name's Dan Pomeroy. I actually direct MIT's Policy Lab, so I'm excited to see that we made it as a bright spot, especially since we're only a couple years old, so I'll ask you about that afterwards. But my question is for Susan, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on your comment about connecting between policymakers and policy implementers, and then also say what kind of training or help you do with faculty in terms of teaching them how to do outreach to public policymakers to inform policy with their research.
So 6 years ago, I never thought I would know anything about evaluation, really. Quantitative data analysis is not my thing, but it is now. And I never thought I would do anything in the realm of science policy, and it is a necessary part of what we do. So we think about how we translate the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act along with the National Science Board Standards for NSF for our faculty to help them understand why broader impacts is important, why public engagement is important across the federal landscape. So in that respect, we try to help our researchers understand why that's important and how it impacts their lab. And then with our support services, help them do that very well. On the flip side, though, many of our researchers don't go to NSF. In the last 2 years, it seems like I spent every other month there, which actually has been very helpful, because we get to know more people and we get to say things to them like, there are a lot of people who are on review panels who don't recognize poor broader impacts. I'll say that the trend has been, it's getting more competitive, but we still come back with people who come back from panel and say, it didn't matter. We just funded the best science. The broader impacts was just okay. We also come back and talk about the fact that for a lot of our new faculty who have really great out-of-the-box engagement ideas, sometimes those don't review very well, because a lot of times panelists will review what they want to see in their engagement rather than what is actually there. And if it's new and innovative and out of the box, sometimes that gets dinged. And I think that also comes as a surprise sometimes to NSF, because they expect there to be innovation. So we get to say things that they don't always get to say, and we get to help them get their message to our folks.
A quick follow-up, do you do much in the way of training the faculty, or to develop broader impact strategies that involve things like reaching out to regulators to make sure that regulations are informed by their science, or meeting with legislators to do the same kind of thing?
So yes, so we have to be very careful, because you can't use NSF money to lobby, so we don't do that. But we really do try to partner with people who are practitioners. So how do you take your research, write that into a policy statement? So we work a lot with our Truman School of Public Affairs, because they will help researchers write policy briefs and research briefs. We also started a new course this fall for science policy for graduate students, because we want to train up the next generation to understand why science policy is important and how they interact with it.
Howdy.
Can I just add one quick thing on that? Sorry. We talk about policy engagement, broader impacts. Those are terrific questions or things to discuss. I just wanted to add that another reason for making certain that faculty or researchers, scientists have access to policymakers is not just to convey information that should be included in regulation, but the opposite as well. That in an NSF grant, in the intellectual merit side of things, the ability to justify why your work is important, having some fluency about how that issue is being actually discussed in a public policy sphere and what the public policy needs are, I think is also an important way to strengthen grant proposals on the merit side.
Thank you. I'm going to go here, just if you can hold your, because this is for all the panelists, and it kind of builds on, you had those 6 bullets, and number 2 was people.
Yes.
And we haven't talked about people a lot, although this is supposed to be about public. So this question is, can panelists talk about importance of cultural competency and sensitivity for academics working in communities other than their own, particularly marginalized? PhD does not train you for this. So if
Well, I'm actually going to refer to the panel this morning. I'm not sure if folks saw it, but it was really good, and it was exactly addressing that concept. And somebody asked a similar question, and they basically said, listen. They were really saying that that's the key point, is to listen to your communities. There was a speaker from Ciencias Puerto Rico, and I'm going to forget the other person, but I really recommend looking at the folks that talked on that panel, because they really addressed the concept of listening to the communities and connecting that with your science. I want to make another point also that was sort of connected to the last question and this. Back to this, your science will get better. So on the policy and on working with the communities, it's not one way. It's not just because you're satisfying NSF. It's not just because you're doing it for a human good. There's a guy named Steve Gaines at UC Santa Barbara who has brought in tens of millions of dollars because he's worked with problems that are important to society. But he talks about the trajectory of how it absolutely changed and increased the sophistication of his research, because as he worked with fishing communities, he realized we're talking about an economic problem. He started to publish and work with social economists, and he's at a whole different level of the problems he's asking and the questions he's asking and the problems he's solving. So it really is about science getting better, and that's the sort of elevated concept in the end.
I think this is a terrific question and crucially important, for example, in the environmental sciences, where we have certainly anecdotal evidence or cases of a bad track record, where we have essentially worked poorly with communities, or in many cases, some of which are very well known now, failed to serve particular communities. There is a lot of scholarship about how to do that better, and we need to more widely distribute it. But I think it's also a very important reason why the co-creation concept is so important. To think that as scientists, we sit in these institutions that are regarded as having so much knowledge and information. And we do, and we need to participate and get it out into the world. But we are not the sole owners of knowledge, and it might be that the ideas that we have about how things could get implemented or what needs to be known are incomplete. And that's what the co-creation concept celebrates. I think this is also crucially why we have to have a diverse workforce, and why issues of minority participation in people from disadvantaged communities need to be part of the scientific community.
And I just have a quick practical comment about that. One is we have to engage our stakeholders earlier. I'm just going to be honest. We have researchers who call us at the last minute and want excellent BI, and then we have those who start 6 months in advance. You know, the NSF Career Awards are due at the middle of July. We encourage our faculty to start thinking about their community engagement plan in November. That seems crazy, but if you really want to engage with stakeholders and you really want to have a relationship with them, you got to build that relationship, right? We have so many stories of where we burned our community partners because we came in at the last minute, we wanted everything, we want a letter of support tomorrow, and then we don't get it and we don't tell them, or we do get it and we don't tell them, and we cut their part. So my practical advice here is we've got to be better citizens and better partners, start earlier, and then also remember that our community partners know what they need. So it's not coming from the idea of I have something to give you, it's what can we build together, which comes back to the co-creation of knowledge.
thank you for waiting.
Happy to. Thank you so much for your presentations, and welcome to Texas. So I'm a student at Texas A&M, and one of the things that I'm involved in is helping my fellow classmates get involved with reaching out to policymakers here in Austin. So from your own experiences, what are some of the lessons that you would share with students who self-organize to engage with policymakers in the public?
You know, this is kind of a dumb response. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. We spend time working with graduate students and also with junior faculty about engaging with policymakers. And one of the first things that we say is you need to actually know like where to park at the Capitol. You know? And there are very simple things that are barriers between, I come from St. Paul, Minnesota, which is also the state capital and where the part of the University of Minnesota is located. And we joke that there actually is very little traffic between the two. You know, they don't know how to park at the university and we don't know how to park at the Capitol. So I actually think that a lot of just encouragement and suggesting and creating opportunities for people to go over. We host just meet and greets, for example, with legislators. We tend to time it around occasion where there is action on the floor, but not something terribly critical. And we make it really easy, and there's food, and we welcome staff, and we encourage graduate students and faculty to participate. I don't know that there's a lot of incredible policy making that happens in those settings, but it reduces that barrier between the two and encourages the development of interactions. So those are really simple things, but you're already doing that by even making the group.
And for anyone interested, we have a workshop tomorrow, Saturday from 11:30 to 12:30 in the conference center in the exhibit hall, and it's called Communicating with Policymakers. So it's a 90-minute workshop that we have to give you the 60-minute workshop that we offer to just give you a couple of pointers and tips about the best ways to engage in such an activity. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them, but we do have our workshop on Saturday morning. Thank you.
Would you like a little more response? Or? You probably actually can apply a lot of the stuff of just communications 101 to what you're doing in terms of think of what's the goal, what's your audience, really think about that. And then this crowd knows, I think a lot of people do, the deficit model, which is a problem all the time with sort of environmental groups or any kind of science group. If I just tell you what I know, you're going to see the light. It's not true. It doesn't work that way. Think about what it is that your audience values and what's the barrier of them getting to what you are thinking is the better way to go, and try to address the problem, with that lens of what's their barrier and how can I offer something. And then it's really back to relationships. So, think about when their budget time is. They don't want you to come during budget time. Usually summer is a great time. And in that time, they're welcome to have a relationship and get information. You're helping them learn about something. And if you do that in a regular way, now you're a friend and you're somebody that they'll call on when they need something or need some kind of scientific information translated. So really, customer service, build the relationship, but think about what they care about, not just that you have all the information and once they learn it, they will see the light.
And I would also take advantage of the different things that are offered on your campus. So we have a legislative affairs office that works both in Jefferson City, our capital, but also in Washington, D.C. Use them, take advantage of them. Our graduate and professional student council also has a legislative affairs liaison who does a lot of work like that. So if you don't have one, it sounds like you're creating one, but part of that and working with that. We also do something called Undergraduate Research Day at the Capitol, where we take our undergraduates to the state capitol. You can do the same thing with your graduate students. Our system also has a legislative day. This is locally at our state capitol, but that's really important for appropriations too. So anything you can do to take advantage of what's existing infrastructure on your campus and resources, do it.
Hi, my name is Ben Rhodey. I'm a member of the technical research staff at Psychor here in Austin. One thing that no one has mentioned explicitly yet is citizen science, which we might define roughly as involvement of the lay public in field research. Now, modulo the consideration that this is more appropriate in some fields than others, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on the costs and benefits of involving it in outreach and the potential for encouraging engagement. Also on whether or not we have data yet to indicate its effectiveness and how we might go about getting such data.
I'll just, I think that for me, the most common parallel between some of the things we've been talking about in citizen science are similarly issues of barrier to entry, right? I think of how many colleagues who can think of really fascinating data sets they'd love. As an ecologist, right, they're just, actually data limitation is one of our main issues, our ability to sense what's actually out there in the world, and citizen science is a great opportunity. But the idea of creating and building citizen science, a project, is overwhelming for many faculty. In fact, more overwhelming than writing an op-ed or going and talking to a legislator, right, or attending a science communication training workshop. So I think thinking about what are the resources that can be available that lower the barrier to entry. And as for the evidence that it's beneficial, I think the evidence it's in the journals already, right? Think about the data sets and the inferences that we have. Again, think principally, I know ecology, that are now built on citizen science, that it's not peripheral, it's not an idea, it's actually been demonstrated to have utility in basic science.
So I'm based in San Francisco, and it's an exciting time right now for sort of science and nonprofits because these big tech funders are making enormous foundations with unlimited resources, and they're looking for the breakthrough intersection between technology and social impact. And they're all about open source, and they're all about, and so citizen science is about to explode, is my sense. I just had a meeting with the guy that's advising Eric Schmidt, and Eric Schmidt's about to lead Google, and he's about to sort of put all his effort into this, and he wants, one area is sort of how do you use digital information to revolutionize education. So I think if scientists start to sort of realize this is new emerging field and a new source of funding, I'm pretty positive in the next 5 years we're going to be in a totally different place. And the other part is open source. If it's open source, then you have thousands of people and more across the globe that can help you analyze that data. There was a presentation I saw recently, and it's a researcher who put some cameras at the bottom of the ocean to look for the giant squid. And they had so many people from around the world looking at that footage. Who would think this? And basically the footage was a black sand bottom, and then every once in a while a shadow would come by. But when you make it open source and we have such reach with technology, the possibilities are endless coming up.
Well, and my take on that too is that citizen science is a wonderful thing, and for our researchers, there are existing citizen science opportunities they can leverage. There's also opportunities to create more, and again, by leveraging your stakeholders and your resources. A lot of our researchers who do that admit that there may be, depending on who their people are, thinking about how they're going to use that data, but still using it. And then the other is we also encourage citizen science with younger generations. Maybe the data isn't going to be as pristine as you like, but anytime you're getting kids involved in the actual doing of research and hands-on work, they love it and they get excited about it, and it's helping them understand how science works.
Yeah, I'll just add to that this is one area where we actually have bipartisan support. One of the last bills signed during the Obama years was this American Competitiveness Act, and within that there's Citizen Science and Crowdsourcing Act. So that's an area that really has support. As you can see, it's got demand from the industry side and so forth. And to piggyback on the point made here, that this creates pathways for that citizen now to be engaged and to participate in the science, and then you have better trust in relationships. So it does a lot of wonderful things. Okay, we have 5 minutes, so yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I am Ajinkya Kamath. I am a postdoctoral fellow in technology and innovation policy at Harvard University. My question is about getting industrial researchers involved in public engagement with science? Because there are so many industrial researchers as well, and many people after PhD, they go into that alternative, or not actually alternative career. And another area where I think that would provide value is quite often industrial researchers use research coming out of academia and transform that into products and services which people actually use and they engage with. So I think they can provide perhaps a unique perspective in conveying that value of science to public. So one, how do you think we can get them involved, and if there are any peculiar difficulties or if it is particularly easier than academia to get them involved?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to add a little bit on it because this panel was supposed to how do we advocate for, and we had been our conversation started out focusing on the university level. How do we convince the administration? But we need to do it even outside the university. So how do we make the broader case and advocacy for public engagement in science, and not just in the university, but broaden it industry and other places, and federal government too, because you mentioned boundary work. If that boundary work is not recognized as a value proposition by itself, it will not get funded, it will not get done, and then the wonderful work that Susan is doing, those kind of things will not be supported. So how do you advocate for it from the industry perspective, from the government perspective, in addition to university?
Well, I'm not a scientist in industry, but so I don't have any personal experience, but our institute works very closely with a variety of industry scientists, and so I can speak mostly about what we have done to try to engage, to form collaborative relationships around which we are talking about scientific ideas and how they're in service to society. And one thing we've done is the Institute on the Environment is composed of fellows, which are faculty. They're also importantly include non-tenure track researchers. We have senior investigators who are even more dedicated to translation and solutions-oriented research than sometimes our faculty are. But we also include in that group of fellows external, they're kind of faculty-like. They're extraordinarily knowledgeable about important issues, but they're in the private sector, some cases in NGOs. And so we include them in our scholarly community and in our public engagement activities. And I also think there are some really bright stars out there of individuals who are showing best practices. A colleague I know well and so value and appreciate is an individual named Raj Rajan, who's the chief sustainability officer at a company called Ecolab. Raj is not just figuring out what Ecolab needs to do, that's part of his job, but he's being a thought leader in a much broader space around water sustainability that is helping to build Ecolab's reputation and also helping to educate the internal company about the value of engaging in broader societal issues. So I think one thing we can do is identify those people and use them as role models. That's the model we would tend to do in academia too, to celebrate individuals that are demonstrating best practices.
This is adding on Jessica's point because there's a couple trends going on. One is it's really important to companies right now to retain their employees. And so they have a lot of effort into employee engagement programs, which is probably what Ecolab is doing and their corporate responsibility person is in charge of. But so connecting with their employee engagement, because then they feel like the employees feel they're more connected with purpose, and then they want to stay at the company and they connect with the values of the company. The other trend that's going on is STEM mentorship is getting a lot of growth right now. And they're dying. There's a lot of nonprofits connected with STEM mentorship, and they're dying for industry partners. So there's a group called Iridescent. There's a group, and they're all over the country. They partner with Boys and Girls Club and 4-H Club. There's a group, there's US 2020 as networks of STEM mentorship all around the country, and a local group in the Bay Area called Ignited. So I'm positive every community has a STEM mentorship nonprofit that is dying to connect with industry folks.
What I want to say about this, go back to Bear. Bear's been doing Making Science Make Sense for 22 years, and nobody really knew about that. And they give their employees 2 days off to volunteer anywhere they want. Yesterday we had people from the Kansas City area, but we also had people who drove in from Pittsburgh who just wanted to come and do science experiments with kids. So there are a lot of people in the industry who want to do that. The other big ticket seller item is that it helps with workforce development. Everybody wants a diverse workforce. Everybody wants to see if they can get the skills that they need for industry put into the curriculum. Entrepreneurship and innovation is very critical, at least in our area it is. So they're very interested in that. And then the other thing is that NSF, if you want to do a research experience for a teacher's program in engineering, you're required to have an industry partner. So we're seeing more of those kind of linkages coming up in our RFPs as well.
Actually, I wanted to make one more point on a different subject. So it's really important that we also remember that we are in an ecosystem of the whole campus and not just science and research. And so it might work for us to talk to the Vice Provost of Research, but the Chancellor and the Provost are talking to social sciences. And they may have a whole different set of needs and a whole different set of priorities. And you can get a lot further if you connect with the folks in those schools that want to engage, as well as what's going on in the science engagement. So think about the ecosystem you live in.
We are out of time, but I want to thank our panelists. Please join me in thanking them for the wonderful conversation. And also thanks to Emily for putting together this wonderful program. And thank you all.
Okay. Thank you again, everyone, for coming today. A couple last notes before you go. Oh, that did not show the slide I thought it was going to. So please take a couple minutes to take our little survey on how you thought today's panels went. We really like to get your feedback. As I said this morning, this is our 6th year of doing the Communicating Science seminar, and we want to make sure that we're doing panels and formats that are useful for you. As you heard Jemima say, we have a number of other public engagement events happening throughout the meeting. So look at our SciComm and Meet a Scientist accounts to find out more about those. And I hope that you will join us on Saturday evening for the Public Engagement with Science networking reception that will take place back here at the Hilton at 6:30. So you can find that in the meeting app or ask one of us if you need directions. Finally, we will have a recording of today's seminar available on our Public Engagement with Science website probably early next week. So you can find that as well as many other resources at AAAS.org/PES. So with that, one last round of applause for all of you and for all of our great panelists. And have a great meeting.